it can be used for good or bad. So by perfect tool, I raised that before, and I don't mean the tool is perfect, because nothing's perfect, but it just leads to the idea that it can cut both ways. And the closer it can cut, indiscriminately, the closer to perfection it is. So when I did a search in the demo, it came up with a whole bunch of my whining and complaining, and so there's just to say. Got to be careful what we say, because it'll come back. And Stacy was saying that, there's some of those things that I'm not proud of. Maybe within the group context, it's fine, where people understand me and know where I'm coming from, but just as a extracted soundbite, it doesn't really represent me well, and I'd rather not share it publicly. But this tool it's like that on steroids, completely out of context, anywheres from any video that we have. Unlisted, or not private.
That's why I think it's really important that at this stage, we at least discuss what our agreement would be in terms of these videos. Which I tried to do on one barn raising call. And I was kind of disappointed that we couldn't even complete that.
Expect the unexpected.
Welcome, Glenn.
Hi, Glenn.
Be on your best
Hey.
behavior. Yeah,
Yeah.
bring your best, and you won't have to worry about it, right, Glenn?
I'll try to be on my best behavior today. I promise.
You're the one that doesn't need to be told, mostly.
Better and better behavior just improves and improves.
The fate of humanity is in the balance, and this is being recorded.
Always in the balance.
Which brings me to another thought that I've been having a lot of. In families, why are you laughing, Doug?
No, I was going to come back to you because I wanted you to unpack what you were sharing about, like, why exactly can't we get past whatever? Fill in the blank. Go
Well,
ahead.
I'm going to pivot to a different thought that I've been having. Because I've just been thinking, like in families, most families are raised, keep your dirty laundry private, don't discuss things to different degrees. Like in my family, within the family, we were very open. There was nothing that I couldn't say to my parents, which is, that was a really good feeling. But like most other families, you don't go and announce your stuff to other people. Other families are even stricter, even within the family, they don't discuss that. And I'm thinking, how can we expect to have a society, and I'm specifically talking about America right now, where we acknowledge we've done something wrong and then try to move past it and fix it, when we can't even do that in families? Like we're taught from the very beginning, don't acknowledge what you do wrong, hide it, it's something to be ashamed of, instead of the opposite, which is where we need to go if we want to be able to put our history behind us and create something new. So that's what I've been thinking about.
Yeah, if it could begin in the family, then everything would be influenced. Everything is influenced, isn't it?
And then Alex?
Go ahead.
Me? I didn't hear Doug.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's actually remarkable that we think that this education happens in families, I think families don't, by and large, in my experience, consciously teach this kind of thing. It's just whatever, the parents did, I do, right? That's the unconscious passing down of traditions and habits and behaviors and rules and penalties without real conscious both examination as well as refinement of it. I mean, how often do you see, hey, that's just what we do here? That's a common answer, even if the question is asked. So I think that really getting explicit about it, as Stacy is asking, and I believe as I've been asking, is part of that path towards getting feedback. See, without feedback, you just exist in your own world and you think that the world is the way it is, unless something in the world reflects back to you. Either you observe or someone actually, gives you their observation themselves. And unless that happens, you just think, what you've been doing is perfectly fine. And then there will be never any change. So I think that's why I kind of brought this up in yesterday's context, that having these records, these actual close to reality as possible records of what happened is so valuable, because we can use that for feedback. We can use that for examination of our own behavior. We can use that for case studies. We can use that for, when certain things came up, as Colin was indicating. So I really, really strongly believe in acknowledging feedback, examining it, deciding what change in behavior or change in thinking might be appropriate, if any, and then doing so. I was also, just one last note, my friend Jack Park, he had cancer a couple decades ago. He read an awful lot. He researched his cancer and very quickly grew beyond his doctors and his knowledge of what particular was affecting him. And he put together various different scientific articles and medical reports and whatever, and he actually did a lot of the recommendations, and he became cancer-free. I actually believe that Jack is one of the best examples I know of a human being who looks for information, analyzes and interprets that information, and changes their behavior and thinking based on that information. In theory, it's easy. In practice, I actually don't see very many people doing this. Very, very few. Over.
Alex?
It's a good story.
Hello, everybody from down under. And thinking about unblocking this crisis facing the globe, the environmental problems and the political problems, which contribute to them. But this values aspect of the collaboration is thrusted in the forefront for our examination by virtue of the fact that we were all gathered here together and recording the session on an ongoing basis. So this brings up the idea of, do we value cohesive collaboration? And if we do, have we got a document, are we carrying a membership card, or do we have a badge or something of that description? Even if it's only a pledge, when you put your hand up and say, yes, I pledge to cooperate with the decisions of the unanimous group when they make decisions for the guidelines. And the 10 commandments, or the 12 commandments, if we decide to add more, because that gives us a cohesive framework to look at. See, this is a tetrahedron. This is about the simplest three-dimensional structure of a solid representation that you can have, and it's got 4 entry points, 4 faces. So that tells me that there's more to the picture than yes or no, God or evolution, left or right in politics. There's always more detail, and there's always grey areas to examine and come up with the creative truth, or the better understanding, the deeper understanding. It's like standing back from a picture to get a better view. I did that in the library, did that in the art gallery. You often do it. And on the internet, you can do it with fractal extreme, and you can keep zooming out infinitely with the fractal software or zooming in infinitely and see these fractal creations that are gorgeous representations of maths from the mind of God. or the mind of someone. And it's quite incredible. You know, that entry point on the event horizon of a black hole is where the entry point is that comes into our realm of consciousness and cohesive existence. And the exit point is in the same spot because it's a cycle, you know, it goes around. The energy is never consumed nor destroyed. It just keeps going around and around. And we enter this universe and exit this universe at the same spot. So it's like our life. Metaphorically, it's like our life. You're born and you die. It goes through a cycle. What I'd like to believe in while I'm alive is that I've got something I'm in touch with that I can consider separate from my skins and blood cells. And that's my spirit, my mind, my consciousness. That makes me inquire into what the values that mean to me. Why should I have any values? And if I do have some values, should I share them with people, like-minded people who have similar values, so we can get on and do something creative? So before I carry on with the rant, I just like to say that's a lovely valley you're in down there, Kyla. It looks like a ravine out in the wilderness, that background picture. Over.
Yeah, I had a question. Alex, can you, I'm just a little bit confused. Can you just, like, in 3 sentences, tell me, like, the actual point? Like, if I were writing in a chat, exactly the message that you wanted to convey to us, what was it? Because I didn't disagree with anything you said. I just wasn't sure what was the point that you wanted us to hear. And I want to hear what you were trying to communicate.
Well, I was trying to communicate the fact that we are here to do something. We're here to achieve a goal when we're working with each other in various sprouts.
So you mean in GCC in particular?
Well, no,
Or
this
you
is
mean the world.
The GCC to me is the experiment, but
Okay.
the things we're doing for the environment and the world are the sprouts that happen outside the GCC.
Okay.
No, they're not part of unblocking. This is for each of us to get what's on our chest off our chest.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And that's what I had on my chest.
Now I understand.
What I hear is it makes sense to me, but again, it's very big questions that you're talking about, of course. The future of the world. So that is a lot to take in. Maybe I can offer something or share something here. Because I was watching through the records of some of the earlier GCC conversations yesterday because of this brilliant tool that Colin has created, where you can put in a word and you can search through all the times that this word has appeared in the different conversations, as well as word clouds. And it was so interesting to see, you know, how I was 3 years ago and some of these other people that I hadn't seen for a while, and to listen to a few things that were said. And there was one of them where I shared something that resonated with several there. And it actually had to do with a sort of response to this issue that you mentioned, Alex, about the duality of left and right, God or evolution, the dichotomies, various kinds of dichotomies that exist in language and which are ideas. It's sort of like a kind of habitual way of thinking in terms of opposites, and the triangle, of course, represents a way out of that conflict and towards unification, and also towards a certain stability and a certain strength and a certain creativity as well. So it's a lot of things that lie in this triangle, and there's also, you know, the inner world, the outer world, and the in-between, where the in-between movement is kind of like the movement of the breath. But this is obviously a lot. But what I said something about there, I think it's still very interesting, is how maybe an approach to this issue isn't about finding a better abstraction or replacing this dichotomy with that dichotomy, or even a trichotomy, but could it be that maybe what is needed is to really reevaluate the very relationship we have with abstraction itself, in the sense of the tendency to try to use thought to reduce something complex and dynamic to something static. And it's a very, very big question. I think it was one of the questions that inspired Krishnamurti through his whole life, and many, many others have been concerned about it. It goes to the root of thought. And if we could somehow come to a place where we're free of all the dichotomies, of all the categories, of all the reductions, and we could have a situational awareness, which is clear, which is embodied, where we're present, where we can interact with the world and we can be creative in the world. And this is where this idea of behavior becomes so meaningful for me, because then I consider behavior as a pattern of movement in space of the body. And therefore, this notion of a pattern of movement in space of the body might represent a way out of this cloud of abstractions that humanity's mind has been trapped in for thousands of years. And yeah, I'm pretty much at the end there, but I also want to mention that Joel, who's joined some of these sessions, I think this is also one of his big concerns. It's a very big issue, but I also think it's a big opportunity, and that we can really consider this as an opportunity we have, because we could create and build a situational event-based language with the tools that we have now. And these tools are amazing. We can transmit signals with the speed of light across the whole planet. It's actually a miraculous gift that humanity has managed to create the internet. So therefore, I think it's every reason to be very optimistic about this. I'll end there.
You're muted, Doug.
So I'll sort of double down on where you ended up. So what if you don't go to the body and movement of, but just relate to it in terms of energy and energy flow?
Mm-hmm.
So the essential, if you sort of subscribe to Lipton stuff, the essential essence of life is energy flowing. It's movement of energy, right? So we're creative, generative species by nature. We manifest things. We bring things into manifestation. So I spent the last couple of years really focused on that moment. How does that happen? Like, what's the essential beginning and sequence related to how we create? And less so individually than collectively. Like, how does one, n number, at least two or more people come together and co-create, right? So, the most fundamental version of that is the first thing that needs to happen is we have to think of something.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea, And just backing up one step, in order to do that, we have to hold in common a space within which that thought emerged. So the thought emerges. That's usually a singular and unitary thing of one person. The next progressive energizing and heading of that thought to manifestation is with others, is they need to share it or publish it. Like it's got to leave the confines and silence of their head and be expressed in the universe. With that expression, it means energetically, it can touch and affect others. And if those others are around in the same space, in alignment on a values level and on a purpose level in terms of we're creating something in service to what, then the expression enables others with those alignments to go, yes, I'd like to contribute to that. I'd like to collaborate. And now you've energetically expanded the time and attention of the number of people that have aligned around a thing, an idea in common. And following an elemental sequence here, that happens in space. In air, it is crystallized in articulation with others.
Did you say
So
crystallized?
Crystallized. Air brings clarity of understanding. So on an understanding grokking level, it comes into focus. And then it goes to fire, which is warming it up, energizing it. That's the individual self-motivated commitment to contribute to a collaborative effort in service to bringing it to manifestation. So that's the warmth. And then you go to water, and that's okay, the nurturing of it. That's the feminine. And that's what's needed. That's the what's needed. And all of this, by the way, is from a central alignment around the idea of the moment of creation, which is the emergent now. It's in the present that something is manifest. It's not from the past, because resorting to or turning to the past in the present moment is to play the past forward. So at that point, you're not creating new. You are playing forward and recreating the old. You're perpetuating past. And if you shift into projection of future, you've lost the creative moment to projecting into a fantasy that doesn't exist yet. But while you're doing that projecting, you're not in the present moment actually creating. So it's recognizing the power and the importance of present moment, like from the emergent now, back to the elements, from water, what's needed now, not what is need from the past because always did it that way, or projected need in anticipation of reality that doesn't exist. It is what is needed in the present moment for right now. And then from water to earth, make it so. Take the ingredients that are needed, take the actions that are needed, and go about making it happen. And once it's rooted, once it's in earth, right? It's nourished with water, it's warmed up with fire, it's got all the ingredients for life, it's clear in terms of what it wants to become. That frees up the people involved to then shift back into space, empty and without any carry, to to identify what's the next thing you want to create.
Exactly.
And it's really, this goes back to like ancient wisdoms, ancient times, that recognize this is all about progressive energy, increasing density, right? From space, which
Quality
is nothing, to Earth, which is
and
ground.
balance as well.
And balance of all of these forces,
Yes.
all the time, in every present moment, that all of them are present. If one is overpowering, any element can be positive and constructive in service to balance, or it can be completely destructive. Fire without balancing elements scorches earth. Water without balancing elements washes everything away. Air without balancing elements, same deal. It has the power to be destructive.
So can we say then that we always create ourselves in one way or another, and that the quality of what is created depends on the quality of presence now?
I believe that, yes.
So
Like we get exactly what we ask for.
yeah.
And
Absolutely.
if I bring me in fire, and each time you bring a group together, you also have to recognize everybody's arriving in their natural frame and set point. And if their natural frame or set point is fear, or their natural frame and set point is anger, or their natural frame and set point is hurt, or their natural, then
So dense energy.
they're going to contribute them in whatever way that is and shows up for them to the collective that gets manifested, and the manifestation is going to reflect the imbalances. The imbalances are going to disrupt flow, are going to disrupt
The harmony of the flow.
achievement of the generative potential moment to moment to moment. Thank you.
Yeah, just to add to that, and Alex is holding it up now, I think part of the reason 3 is considered that magical number is in service to balance.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that was what I was getting to as well. Yeah, because it's like balance is so important to all this, right? It's a balanced attention that's needed, a balanced awareness. And that's what being truthful would be as well. If it's in the moment, it must be a balanced consciousness, attention, awareness.
And the common imbalances, like the imbalance of our paradigm and time today, is a lot of air and a lot of earth and a lot of fire, not a whole lot of water, not a whole lot of space. And so you got this dystopic freight train creating this nightmare reality, full of fear, full of hatred, full of catastrophe on an environmental level. It's all of it is a direct reflection of what we asked for, what we're creating by our hand.
Could I flag something here? Because I think you brought up a really interesting thing, and that is that while we are in this creative superposition, and while I would say we are living in a wonderful world, and in many ways the best of times that we've ever had, but there is still the case that there seems to be in our culture an artificial story about everything is falling apart is the story. And we are to blame. We, the humans, we are bad, bad, bad. That's the story. And everything we do is wrong, and everything the others do are wrong. And it's that kind of a story. And it's a story about a sense of despair and hopelessness and being stuck in these conflicting dynamics. And this story seems to be fueled by a certain kind of internet economy of clicks and page views that sort of feed on certain kinds of attention and certain kinds of addictions actually to I don't know, certain experiences, I guess. But so there's an entertainment to it as well, actually. And it's a sort of it can be used to sort of say, I don't need to take responsibility because everything is messed up anyway. So there's a lot of problems with it. And it goes together with conspiracy theories, with assuming all kinds of intentions about others, etc., etc., etc. But the point I want to get into is that this is a very artificial phenomenon. It's something that exists on the internet. And I think that deep inside everyone knows it just isn't the case. And that's not who we really are. That person isn't black or white or man or woman or progressive or conservative. That is a multi-dimensional, conscious world of life. I mean, we know that there's something inside us that knows that all of this stuff is just nonsense. So I think it's on a superficial level in one sense. And it's also good that if we become aware of it, we can become more free of it. So that's why I'm glad you brought that up, that there is a kind of, you had something there.
Well, just if you take a little bit of the projection out of your share, projection in terms of we all know, and projection projection that it's a universal holding and victimization in terms of the whole dystopic version. Well, everything is a reality that exists with everything that is an expression and facet of it. The good, the bad, and the ugly. All of it is in fact, the reality that's reflected back when we open our eyes in the morning. So do I believe my version of where you went in terms of, don't we all know? Do I believe every human being has the innate capacity to reawaken and reconnect and remember what it feels like to be a human being, period, no add-ins, without fear, without terror, without hatred, without anger, without all of the triggered, reactive, energized things that in Western culture via media and internet and everything else, people are being drowned in to keep the fear and the hunger and the need and the dissatisfaction and the, appetites and insanity going, right? There are tens of thousands of small healing centers, ecosystems, permaculture farming efforts on a community and local level. There are millions and millions, if not probably, I'd say probably half the global population, so 4 billion plus people that aren't exposed to any of that, have no media, have no internet, have no anything. They're just existing with immediate circumstance. So what is what is, and it includes all of that stuff. For me, the question really comes down to, each human being has unlimited generative capacity and potential. And the only human being that I have dominion and control over is me. So am I, in my contribution to reality in the world I want to create, am I, with my conscious awake time and attention, contributing to the world I want to manifest, contribute to being part of manifesting, or contributing to the existing paradigm and all that other stuff? right? So it's about, what am I choosing? What am I spending my time on? What am I in service to? So for me, you know, you want to feed the black wolf, you want to feed the white wolf, right? I don't want to feed the black wolf. I don't give it time. Not interested in that. If I give it 5 seconds of conversation, I'm feeding it. That's my
What's the
contributing.
The black wolf?
The
for
black
you?
wolf is hatred, is fear, is anger, is power over, is all of the baser instincts and
So you're saying in the behavioral sense.
well, I'm seeing it in the choice, discretion, intention,
Yeah.
that in the power of creation as reflected by my time and attention and what I invested in, what I apply it to. I don't wish to feed that or give that any of my time and attention. I want to focus on the things I think that will hopefully bring about a change and transformation of that into what I feel the world can be.
Yeah, I totally feel that
It's an
way
energy.
as well.
It's an energy thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, what do I want to add energy to?
You
And if
reap what you sow, right?
and if I even talk about that, like even my responding to you about it, I'm feeding it a little bit. So I really,
Well,
I
is it
really,
feeding it though if we acknowledge certain patterns as simply phenomena that we can acknowledge, but we acknowledge it from a place of love and care and attention, that will transform it all. So if I hear you right, when you say you don't want to feed that beast, you're speaking in the choice sense. I don't want to have those negative attitudes. I don't want to see the world that way. And if that's, you know, that makes perfect sense, I think. And that can be very well combined with being able to have space to acknowledge these things as real world phenomena and acknowledge that there is an artificial economy, attention economy, which is driving this meme plex and
yes,
meme stream, right? But then I can still be free myself from all of this stuff. That's kind of what I hear you're pointing to. That makes perfect sense, I think. And then you come back to the creativity again, right?
yeah, because I'm not motivated by speaking to that. That's not driving my creative orientation. My creative orientation is 100% held by what I know is in greatest service to others and heading our world in the right direction, and being in service to bringing that. And doing that at 100% doesn't involve invoking or allowing any of that crap to contaminate the focus and the flow. Like, just it's not invited to my party. That does not mean I'm delusional. It doesn't mean I don't have awareness and consciousness of it existing. It doesn't mean I'm negating it. It doesn't mean for that matter, I'm not even judging it. I'm just literally not allowing it to inform or affect where
I think you're not even doing that. You're just focusing on the here and now,
the generative
right?
of the potential of the present moment. Colin and then Alex.
That's beautiful.
Yes, thank you. I just was reading the chat and I was reading what Barry put there and I had a good outburst of a laugh there. We're all doomed. It's all nonsense. Of course, these chat comments are kind of out of context, but that's not what I wanted to mention, but it just caught me in the middle of a laugh there. I really feel that what I was trying to get at with my share is good feedback while I'm thinking of ideas for this tool. And I think this tool is a really good analogy to some of the things we're discussing. So if I come up to the computer and open up this tool, I'm inviting, as Doug said, you know, even mentioning using the tool could be inviting me into a world that may not be good for me or may be good. So if I stay in the mindset while I use this tool that I'm trying to move forward and positively with whatever I see next, don't get sucked into the drama of trying to prove right and wrong. You know, you might be able to challenge people. Do you still believe this? Like, you could go back and look at, you know, and the only real benefit at that point would be, well, I never said that. And they say, well, here it is right here. You did say that. You must not remember saying that and have changed your mind. And then you can say, well, yeah, I guess I do remember saying that now. So, you know, there is some value in people self-reflecting, but if it's trying to rub their nose in it, I don't think it's as effective. In fact, I think it's going the wrong way. So how do you stay in the present mindset while you're looking at the past? I think that's the question with this tool. And the things that I've been asking Doug for, and I'm focusing on today instead of other things wrapped around what I'm trying to say, which basically makes it hard for people to understand what I'm actually asking. What I'm actually asking is, as I'm thinking about the uses of this tool, looking forward to what's next and how we could characterize better understanding in conversations, and trying to filter out the negative parts of the conversation that aren't helping, and acknowledging them. Like Glenn said, in the present mind, we can acknowledge these bad patterns. That's exactly what I'm trying to build next. And that is judgment. And if we don't do it from a present positive mindset, if we want to use this tool for propaganda and, you know, Stacy's worst nightmare, basically, of all the videos and things that she wished that nobody, you know, she kind of shares but doesn't want people to see. If, you know, that's what we focus on, you know, that would be horrible. And so, you know, I've known that I've had this power to go back into the videos and hold people to account, and that's not the way I think to use the tool. And I would like, you know, Doug's generative input, not just from being in a now and present mindset, but as Glenn's saying, if I added a button that allowed this agency or this clarification or signaling, there's many different ways that you can use video and sound. And, you know, we use our hand signals, right? That's what we're talking about, hand signals here. You know, we're apes with a lot of technology. So how do we use it to not bash each other over the head with it? And use it positively? Why we go back and look at the mistakes.
We celebrate one another.
Yeah, so it takes a lot of that positivity that Stacy was talking about and trust at the beginning for us to use a tool like this and to try to use it, you know, for good. So, you know, I think we can make some analogies with this, using this tool of practicing the meditation and prayer or whatever it is that people spiritually need to go through and grow their generativity. And, you know, and not use the tool for, you know, I think that's what Google's motto was when they started, you know, do no evil or something. I think Sam has a motto like that too, and I have it on the journey trail on top of the totem pole. When you enter, it says, you know, do your best good or something like that. It's part of the COI. So yeah, let's focus and figure out what it is we're trying to do. That's what I think. And in a present mindset that Doug is trying to say, where, you know, it's unknown limits of creativity that are available.
Alex has something here, I think.
When Colin's finished.
No, I'm done. Thank you very much, Glenn.
I'm thinking about this idea of the ape with the technology, the big monkey with the technology. We can use it to watch each other's collection of bananas with the wireless webcam hooked up to the internet. And then we can see who's hoarding all the bananas and which monkey is being naughty, not sharing. Over.
Please.
Yeah, I just want to clarify something that Colin said. What I'm talking about is not about hiding videos. It's about making sure that making sure that people see things in context. Right now, we have a media that's set up to pull things out of context, a few sentences here and there, and it gets spread. And then once it's spread, there's no way you can go back and change that. No matter how hard you try, it's not going to happen. So what I'm saying is to be responsible, that before parts of a video are put out, the people included in that video have a chance to respond, so it could be included together, not like a little statement after that may or may not go together. So it's not about hiding things, but it's about making sure that things are put out in a full picture. And, you know, Sam's often said, well, anybody could go back and look and see that that's not the way it is. But most people are not motivated to do that. That's exactly what we see happening in the media today. And I'd like to avoid that, or come up with a process so that that is not the case. So I just wanted to clarify that, because everything I do is for the record, not about hiding anything. But for one more thing, just to give another example, people sign up to do reality shows, and oftentimes their relationships absolutely fall apart. It might have been good for them privately to be able to see themselves in action. But once you put that information out there to people that don't have the full story, it's going to take a bad turn. There has to be trust involved. And you can't have trust when you throw out snapshots of people, because you don't even know that they're not even people. I'm complete.
Stacey, I was wondering, do you think that we have a decent process to address that to some extent with this practice we have been using, that if one of the participants asks if they could not publish that video or delete parts of it, then we'll say, yeah, sure. And we've usually done that, right? I think that's an important thing.
I don't know that we've deleted anything. I'm not for deleting anything. There's a big difference of not publishing it, or publishing it, but not putting it out there publicly, keeping it, you know, in a safe container.
For example. Yeah, I think you're right. It's usually been about that, right? But we don't publish it open necessarily if somebody doesn't want to. I think that's a good practice, because, you know, if one person doesn't want that, you know, why can't we just say, okay, we don't have to share that because there's so much material anyway. So
There's some circumstances, like when you get bombed at the beginning of with a bunch of video that's not appropriate for publishing. It'd be nice, you know, to delete that stuff. And, you know, somebody left their camera on, they walked by naked or something.
Yeah, that's an exception, I think.
Yeah, and you know, and there's also the other side of the can, where we do the best we can diligently and trust each other, but we don't really have full control of what happens. You know, if Sam got booted off of YouTube, then he'd have to take his backup copy and upload it somewhere else, or we would lose, and the search tool all of a sudden wouldn't work. And, you know,
and that's an important thing, actually, that could happen.
I have no control over securing the future of this tool as far as the GCC videos are concerned. No matter what anybody promised me, unless we find a way to, I think what Joshua was saying yesterday, make some kind of a GCC entity Facebook thing. I don't know if you can. You know, I don't really know about publishing that much material. I guess if we all published it, I don't know, it's how expensive that would be. I would like to see us publish the best stuff and just leave the other stuff in a directory somewhere. But if you can't search through it, what value does it have? Because like Stacey's saying, even if people did want to know more about something, if it was taken out of context, how would they go through and figure that out? We don't have a way to navigate it.
They're called the juicy files.
The juicy files.
See, I carry orientation because I don't really, time is not a controlling construct for me. So the whole thing of linear time. And so I've always related to this idea of recording, of capturing, as not for today, but it's for some future time where technology has actually evolved to the point where if Sam becomes the next Feynman, and this archive exists, then that technology would enable somebody to download all Sam parts. Because if we had that of Einstein, boy, would that be sort of cool to have had. And we sort of have a taste of that with David Bohm in his dialogues.
Oh yeah.
And it's terrific to be able to sort of know him, right? So I've always seen the recording and capture as to enable, from a generative standpoint, to enable that future access and invocation in contextual frame when and as wanted. Less driven and preoccupied with now, like this minute, because as a practical matter, it's just too much freaking work. But I see technology heading to a place where AI will be able to do that pretty well. I also literally, and this is to the white wolf and the black wolf, I don't live with any fear. So I don't have concerns about anything being public, anything being seen by anybody at any time that I'm part of. And I've certainly had moments and times where I've been moved to behave in ways that, would not be my ideal poster child example of me at my best. But so what? That's like me at my worst. And that should also live.
Actually, it matters to me quite a bit.
Hold on. So I don't have fear or any energy around any negative frame context in relation to any of it. It's all, it's all of its moment, of its context, of its time. That doesn't mean I'm not a card-carrying licensed attorney, and the whole legal field is rooted in people's fears about scarcity, fears about ownership, proprietary control, authority, risk management. But, like the law is all like the manifest expression of fear in all of its forms. It wouldn't exist if people, weren't carrying that. It's obviously easy to say, well, for good reason, like it evolved in the face of people not doing their best or being their best or doing things to other people. I understand that. But the truth of the matter is the law has absolutely no ability to stop somebody from doing something fucked up if they're intending to do so. It is only a trailing indicator and of aftermath effect. I'm much more interested in how to remove the drivers and incentives for the people doing things that it makes no sense for them to do to others. That's sort of on the sort of fear-centered stuff around what is done or how I may be seen or how these might be accessed or used by people or exposed to the world in some negative way. And I think Stacy was next and then Alex and then Colin.
I think Alex was next, but Alex, can I go? I'll be quick. Thank you. I just want to, in terms of fear, I just want to explain that what I'm saying isn't driven by fear. In fact, what I'm looking to do is to project out into the future something better, which is what we were talking about. So that's why I'm not talking about the law. I'm talking about agreements, which, you know, not legally enforced by law, but just as a way to put into motion what would we want to see different in the future, because that needs to be untangled as well. So I just wanted to add that. Thanks, Alex.
Well, the floor's open at the moment because I can't remember what I was going to say.
Take your
So-
time and think. Go ahead.
Something to do with the fact that we have everything recorded. And if it's easy to go in and delete something with the consensus of the administrators, that record is then doctored. If you know you can do that, you're less likely to be careful what you say. So it's good that they kept the original recordings in case something crops up later and somebody says, "I never said that." And you can say, "Well, you did. In fact, here's the recording." So it helps us be accountable. That's a good thing. Over.
Yeah.
So
If-
true.
If I could just add one more thing, I actually would welcome the idea of going back to some of those recordings that I'm saying should be kept private, and then including them in a discussion of what happened. Because I do think it's important to look at whatever we want to call bad behavior or the things that we might be not proud of, and then be able to discuss it. Then I have no problem putting it out there, because then you're getting a well-rounded picture, and we're all human and we all show up in ways that we don't necessarily mean to, but it's that discussion that I think is so needed.
Because then you'll have a frame around it, which is appropriate, right?
Yes.
And that's
That's the secret sauce right there. Actually, it's if we get together and discuss the event, which is we've done many times with other things. We've just never watched the video of it while we did it, which is really powerful. I think that would be an extra element of power, but it's still us validating what happened and filtering the release. Basically, what I would consider a first run at producing it. So producing it so that you can put a context around it. And that would be the level 2 show. So we got level 1 show material that hasn't been validated on the cutting room floor. Alex is saying, if we could keep it semi-private or private by default, knowing it's all deletable, we could push the envelope of our creativity and do silly things. But do we want to have that kind of an artistic environment? And if you do, you're going to do it anyway. I see Barry doing it, right? Pushing the envelope of things. That's his way of doing it. Should we stop him? I don't think so. Should we question him about it? I think so. Could we do a video retrospective as a third time to go back and look at that, Stacy, and say, is this, really what it appears? Like, I don't think that's, that might actually intrigue Barry. I don't know. It's not something I'm suggesting we do. We could do it with other things like agreements and promises that other people have made that they haven't followed through on. Like they said, we're figuring out what an agreement is, but when you actually make one and don't follow through on it, that's, something that we could say, well, in collaborology, this is a minus on your monthly collaborology emergence chart. You said you're going to do, basically that's project management, isn't it? You say you're going to do these things and you should do them. So, we can use the video for those kinds of things. But lessons learned from mistakes we've made, essentially, in video format is the new piece to this puzzle. We've been doing it before, but releasing each video as a video with no layered context. So if I mention something that happened in the past, the viewers watching this video are just going to have to imagine it. But if we could stop like a news broadcast and say, Johnny on the spot, here's the video. And then, you know, people will see the snip, and then we come back, as Stacy said, and we could validate it. So that's the word I want to leave as the meme of my stream of consciousness. If we validate, then we can feel more comfortable in releasing things, if that's what we picture that we're doing. You know, that sounds like a show, right? Some people aren't here for a show, so they probably don't agree with me. And I'm just interested in the basic facts of the tool that I'm building, whether it rubs people the wrong way, and if it does, why, that we could build safeguards into it from a human aspect that AI can't really do, to go and validate the things that matter. Because AI, I don't know, Doug, but if you want to go back and see Sam as Feynman, let's do a whitewater rafting show on Doug and Sam, the leaders of the GCC, and all the things they said. We could put our minds together with this curation tool, and we could come up with some really amazing stuff, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's a good idea. If you could have a tool for each person to collect segments from each person, you could actually use that to create this profile that we've been talking about.
And then we can leave that for the future, instead of the big mess we made once it go through that. You know,
that's a good idea.
I don't trust AI to sort what I mean.
Just want to briefly say that I also, have heard Sam, he's making a very strong argument for transparency and for keeping the record, and also being willing to share the record because it's what happened and we want to learn. And I think that's very similar to what Alex mentioned about accountability. And then there's this creative possibility that we can use these records. And then that will again build on the material from that is in the records, which builds on the conversations themselves, which is where we come back to what Doug has said, that this is where we can control our attention, our energy. This is the aspect of being. And in a sense, this is where I need to have 100% of my focus all the time. And this is this that I'm sort of hearing what Doug is saying, and that makes perfect sense to me. And if I can have this kind of attention that is in the present moment, that is free of the past, and yet can use or look at artifacts of the past that has emerged from events before, then we could come to a superposition where we are not bound by the past. We are free to move creatively, to recreate ourselves. This is also where we have something like will with a degree of freedom. And then if we can have that mind and play with this tool and look at this material, oh boy, then it's looking promising.
Now you're cooking.
Now you're cooking.
Stacy, I see your hand, but I want to just highlight the distinction, because it's a distinction in the way, in the orientation. It's not in who, what, where, when, how. If you're doing that from present moment, emergent need, value, add. So the inquiry into the past, the invoking or drawing on the past, is in service to present moment living need. It's within a living generative context. That is very different than me projecting into a future that doesn't exist yet, a need to meet that future scenario that's not out of a present moment generative need, but out of a projected fantasy that doesn't exist and may never. And so I'm now potentially devoting huge time, effort, energy into meeting a need of a future reality that may or may not ever come. And how many times do people build things where it's, if I build it, they will come? And you sit down with, you know, the people that are the hardest nosed about this shit are like the venture capital community, right? You know, you sit down and present something that's an aspirational, if I build it, they will come. And they're like, based on what? And some entrepreneurs, like, it's based on a present need. They've identified an actual present need that it's in response to. But 95%, it's based on their own attachment to their own vision of a need that they are projecting into a future that may or may not be real and may or may not involve another human being on the earth. And so if I'm carrying a projected vision or thing or need into present moment, and then I'm going to start moving and building on top of that, that's not rooted in the present moment. It's not emergent from the present moment. And in fact, it's not a true in response to present need. It's a self-generated internal job, start to finish. And if there are other people and they haven't explicitly said, you know, I share your vision and I agree with your projected need, and I agree with building your projected solution to meet that projected need, so be it. But absent that explicit express agreement, alignment, and enrollment, then coming with that is a projection on those people. It's actually an imposition and projection of power, control, authority over. It's actually
We don't need to do that.
It's actually old paradigm. So you know, I remember my moment of truth on the point that I'm currently making, when early day power struggle about whose thing was going to be the thing, and it was before I suggested the deep dives as a way of actually getting everybody their opportunity to get all of their attachments out for everybody. And then when we were done with all of that, we could all collectively look at all of those things, right? But before we got to the deep dives, at one point there were these power struggles going on of mine, no, mine, no, mine, no, mine. And my carry at that time was my attachment to the CMM, right? The collective metacognition machine works platform that everybody needs, nobody's built yet. And I remember a sidebar conversation with Tammy where it just sort of like became immediately clear that any forward progress or motion whatsoever was not going to be served or advanced if I was bringing that attachment. I had to let go of my attachment and just sort of shift into a being in service to. And it was out of that decision point and that realization that I came up with the deep dive. Okay, so let's have blank check open sessions where each person can have as much time as they require, and all the other people agree to bear witness, to take in, to listen to grok, to only question into until clarity arrived. And when the person offering was done and when everybody who received was clear, we then move on to the next person. And the one tacit agreement was everybody hangs in for the game as long as it takes for everybody to get all of their stuff out. Well, we got 2.5 people or 3 people in, and then the people that had gone didn't have the interest or time and attention in listening to others. And it broke down. At that point, it stopped. And I was like, well, that's interesting, right? So for the people that have attachments, getting their attachments out isn't actually, that's the ask, that's the apparent ask, is that they want to be fully heard, fully understand, fully appreciated, realized. But not so much. Like that isn't actually what would satisfy. That's not, in fact, what somebody with carrying big attachment is looking for. They're looking to they're looking to enroll people to join them with their banner, their thing. But it's not a collaborative co-creative thing at that point, right? It's a want to work on my project. It's got a lot of proprietariness in it, got a lot of projection in it. And my whole thing is true human co-creative, collaborative generativity is impossible if it's rooted in, if one person's attachment is
What do you say?
involved.
Impossible?
Impossible.
When I hear that word, there's an alarm that goes off. How do we know?
Well, just because the generativity gets so bogged down and contaminated, and it devolves into power struggle, it devolves into disagreement, it devolves into misalignment, and so there's no way for it to get to full realization.
But here's an important question. I think this is very crucial. Could we have a process of a kind of deep dive, which for certain people can begin where they are with everything they have, including the attachments to their thing, the interest in their thing, the interest in everything they want to do, etc. Can we have a process that can begin there, meet people where they are, but then dive deeper and deeper and do it in a way which is very gentle and very interesting and very beautiful, and where the person themselves really experience it as an incredible journey and a gift, and where they feel appreciated and where they actually are appreciated fully for who they are. Because when we did the deep dives, we did it a little bit, and it was a classical process where the initial momentum just came to a certain level, and we would have to make an extra effort to carry it through. And we only came to the beginning. We only scratched the surface of what was possible with the deep dive format. And there were many other suggestions, and there have been many other experiments since in the Saturday sessions. And there's some new experiments that are now coming up that we're starting a project there, but we've done similar things before, which is something in that direction. So that means that the idea of the deep dives, it hasn't died, it has morphed, it's still alive, but I still feel we're still very far away from realizing it in the really juicy form with its true potential. And then the written archive that Sam puts a lot of emphasis on, the memory, would be an integral part of that deep dive. I've always felt that the idea of the deep dives, it's an emergent idea in this field. I've seen it many, many places. And there's another emergent idea, the idea of the profile, or the idea of almost like the planet for that person, an information system that honors that person. And when those two join together, they also join with the tool Colin is working on, those kinds of tools. It all fits together. So I think that, this was a beautiful idea, and it was some beautiful experiments, and we can go so much further in this direction, so much further, especially if we can ask deeper questions, if we can consider possibilities, if we can build on the ideas, if we can make tapestries where we combine your idea with my idea and see what happens if we put them together. And yeah, so I think that whole direction is extremely promising. But I also think it's important, we have to remember it could happen in many, many ways. Like Colin at that time said he wasn't that interested in being very personal. He wanted maybe to play with a certain tool. Okay, let's have a process that can actually make room for that, that can be so flexible that we can adapt it to people where they are. And if we can do that, then people can come with their attachments, with their habits, with their negativity, with their fear. And
without drinking the Kool-Aid.
Yeah, without drinking the Kool-Aid, absolutely. And we can still meet them where they are, and we can celebrate them as they are. And I think if we could find that kind of an approach, then the whole deep dive thing, it would totally fly, and it would go straight into the idea of profiles. It would bring material straight into that. So we should do that.
Can I repay you? Thank you, Glenn. I would pay you the interruption favor because
I'm finished.
Yeah. I was
Hold on. Actually, Stacy is next in queue. She's had her hand up forever.
Well, I'll butt in front of Stacy too, because she does that, if she doesn't mind. But the thing is I just wanted to say what I had said to Stacy, I say to you, Doug, it's not a failure if it's a good idea. Just as Glenn's saying, how do we bring it back? Maybe that's the new Thursday, right? Right there. And, you have a scorecard, so you can announce what you thought the agreement was, and who was in quorum, and are they still interested, because that was an agreement. And I remember you talking about your disappointment that agreement wasn't fulfilled when you started that. Anyway, that's why I said thank you. That's a frustration. That's a frustration point that I'm trying to highlight. Like, we should dig into those.
So I'm really interested in hearing people's stories, which is what I like about the idea of being able to go back and look at something, but I would then go to the person, get their experience of what was happening. I came in at the end when Deep Dives was ending. So the only thing that I would say is that I think it's a very big ask to have people give 2 hours of their time every single week to listen to other people. And it doesn't surprise me that people dropped off after they shared, which is like really a peeve of mine. I have a problem when somebody, not when they do it once in a while, but when somebody regularly makes a habit of saying, I just came to say this and now I gotta go. To me, that's like, anyway, one of the things that I really loved about Gertrude's, the call that we would have on Fridays, is that even though we focused on one person, which in a way was a deep dive, everybody was included, because I think we have this tendency to think that selfish is a bad thing, when it's not always, because every self wants something, and there's nothing wrong with feeding every self. So I think that in anything we do, there needs to be an opportunity for everybody to participate, at least in some way. And the last thing I want to say is, I think it's especially valuable to be able to go back and see where people are looking at themselves and saying, gee, I really didn't like the way I came across that way. And if they're aware enough that they are able to really look at that behavior and share it, I think that can be very valuable for other people to see. Because I know a lot of what I've learned has been hearing it from other people and then saying, maybe that's why I felt this way. Because it's really hard to see ourselves without some kind of a mirror. So I think I got all my points in there. They all came from different places, but I'm complete for now.
I think there's a value in doing the deep dives and getting to people's nitty-gritty likes and dislikes, their habits and hobbies, because that gives you broader picture of the person and where they most suitably fit into the bigger picture. It's like if a corporation neglects its employees, they're only going to work for the paycheck. They don't give a shit about the product or the corporation. And you've got to turn that around. If you want your corporation to be successful, you can't progress like that, ignoring your employees like they're robots or machines. You know, so that's a corporation with a heart, or an organization with a heart, or a non-profit entity with a heart that cares about what each person has to offer. That's why the people in the management section have good delegation skills. Over.
I actually published, Fabian and I published our first Medium piece. It was on leadership. And in the writing, we haven't sort of gotten to the social media blasting of the fact of it. We've just sort of put it up. It's on Medium, but we have to do step 2 and let people know about it. But in the writing of it, one of the things that came out was consistent with this idea of we create, we generate and create our reality. And I've had a real itch around, a real tickle around the whole leadership construct, because I believe intrinsically it's contaminated with a primary driver of power, control, authority over. And there's now all of these flavors of the month of modifications and alliterations on this leadership and that leadership and servant leadership and light leadership, whatever. But it's all incorporates and holds on to the leadership. I mean, down to individuals should, have self-leadership. And what we took apart in this piece was, if I believe leadership is required, then it means intrinsically I carry beliefs about those that are led being incapable of discerning, discriminating, working out, co-creating, collaborating on their own. So if I want to validate and prove the fact that leadership is required to get anything done, I'm going to create a dystopic system in which people are proactively, by its architecture, design, implementation, and nature, disabled from decision-making, disabled from working together and working through disagreements or challenges or conflicts or whatever. I am literally going to construct a system that disables those capacities so that, in fact, those people do need to be led. I'm going to create that. And every time somebody comes back and says, yeah, well, there's this example and that example and another example where, we've switched that up and, dogs and cats mating and the sky falling and all of this stuff happened and it was chaos ruling because, people didn't know what to do and they couldn't figure it out, blah, 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 blah. And, the truth of it is there are two shoes to that chemistry. There's the leaders who have to decide to let go of having to have power, control, authority over in order to manage or play coordinator, buy in between and serve people doing things. And there's the people that have been acclimatized to being led. And they need to be given huge support to deprogram, to reawaken, to reconnect with their own ability to think and to interact and to innovate and to create and to problem solve. And every time there's a transformation initiative imposed top down, that rolls off the backs of the bulk of the employees and never takes root, and it is of no effect, is because at the end of the day, leadership that contracted that program was not looking for it to put them out of business of power control authority over. And you see it over and over and over and over and over again everywhere. And it's like, what the fuck? Like, if you want to change it, and if you want to open up and tap this huge greenfield, untapped, generative, contributive potential in a 500,000 global employee company, then you got to mean it. And what you unleash and what you tap and what you free up isn't something that you then control. You can't have it both ways. So you got to be open and willing to receive what they come up with.
What
But if I had
places leadership have?
500,000, if I had 500,000 people coming up with their best generative, creative potential, I'll take that over one schmuck on a golf course, purporting to run and control and direct everything for
So what
15
place
million
would
a year.
what place? So Doug, what place would leadership have in your vision?
I don't believe leadership as leadership makes sense. I believe there are people that are skilled and talented in service to an organization in coordinating roles, right? In facilitating roles, coordinating roles, where they're at an overview level in service to supporting the lower level, silos and pockets and team level stuff. There are jobs and roles at that level that make sense, but there's no reason for them to carry power control authority over. There's no reason for structures that are rooted in catching people in failure of performance, catching people in deficiency. Setting up a system that's designed to have them do that.
Yeah, I get that. But what about leadership in the sense of starting an initiative? Initiators. Where does that?
I don't think an initiator is a leader. I think, every single employee is a potential initiator within the sphere of activity and collaboration they're in. That's the point. Innovation and generativity and creativity is innate and intrinsic everywhere at any given moment, at any given time. And there isn't anybody in any job in any large corporation that can't see huge areas of waste, huge areas of potentials for change and efficiency and improvement, none of which is ever tapped or even solicited or asked. They're actually told to shut up and follow orders.
But
deliver their results.
But that would be leadership, right, in the right sense. But it seems that it would be possible to have leadership on all levels. Then that everyone.
Well, I think
leaders.
It's not. But then why do you need to invoke a leader? Do I need to lead myself? It means that I by definition have to disaggregate into two people. Part of me is telling the other part of me what to do. Why can't I just be and bring me fully to creative endeavor?
I mean leadership in the sense of some people starting something new, and that won't be all people. That will usually be a few people. But that's creating.
That's creating. You don't need to turn it into leadership.
Well, it may be, but you kind of, if it's a project that is intended to be carried through, you might want to feel responsible for following it up. And that would certainly be something that many people would consider real leadership.
So in an elemental frame, that's about fire. That's about having passion and bringing energy and warmth.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's an elemental need for anything to be manifest. It's not discriminated against any other participant or contributor, and it doesn't require a title called leadership in order to do that.
No, it's not a title. It's a role that people can take if they choose to take it, and then others can choose to follow them, in the sense, choose to work together behind that initiative. I think that that is one understanding of leadership, which I think will have to have a place in the system that you're describing. Otherwise, it can easily become too passive. If we oppose people who start initiatives and say, oh, you're trying to control, and if we do that just because somebody starts an initiative, if that in itself is not a respected role, then I don't think this is going to work. But if we could have a place for creative leadership, which is not power over, but is in service of the whole, everything you've talked about, but it's leadership in the sense of starting an initiative. Does that make sense?
I don't see the need for leadership to be attached, but I
Well,
don't want to be.
somebody has to just start. You know, they have to start.
But somebody can put that into the center, and that doesn't make them a leader. It makes them contributing something to the center.
Yeah, but if it gets momentum, they might come into a sort of leadership role emergently, because they'll have a special responsibility for the project.
Maybe. I just question whether it's required. Barry and then Alec.
Yeah.
You know, for most of human history, a single individual could come up with an innovation and introduce the innovation with nothing more than their own power, their own intelligence, their own resources, you know, their own time. And lots of innovations were introduced by one person acting alone. And you can still do that today. There are still people who can be the lone inventor who can introduce something new, and other people say, oh, that's a great idea, I think I'll imitate it. There are also some innovations which are beyond the power of any one person to pull off without help. And so one of the ways that a person can be a leader is they say, well, Steve Jobs says, I have this great idea for this new version of a computer, but I don't have all the skills I need. And he needs Wozniak to do the hardware, because Jobs can't do the hardware. So there is a concept of leadership where you have a great idea, but you're shy of some resource that you can't muster on your own. And then the quality of leadership is to be able to pull in collaborators who say, yeah, that's a great idea. I can contribute some fraction of the whole shebang to pull it off, because no one of us can do it by ourselves.
Exactly. Yeah. That's like an entrepreneur.
There are people who get thrust into leadership positions.
That's true.
Look, Bernie Sanders comes up as an example, but I think he had a hand in that himself. But, you know, there are people who display the right attitude and IQ, necessary prerequisites for the position that people want them to take up. And they get thrust into that position whether they wanted it or not. They're not voluntarily doing it. So it's like sometimes that happens, and then the corruption begins after that. Over.
Muted, Doug. Doug, you're muted.
Lead, Charlie Brown, lead.
Part of the reason for my hobby horse around, you know, leadership. The only dimension of leadership that is unique in particular to this word on a visceral level, at definitional levels, all the rest, is the power, control, authority over. I can come up with titles for somebody who has a new idea. And that could be inventor, that could be innovator, that could be designer. And I could have a title for somebody who's really talented at sharing that, communicating that. And that's somebody who's a presenter.
What if they do both?
And well, hold on. And neither of those roles involve any projection of power, control, authority over others. And my idea can express itself in a collaborative frame, and I can share it, and collectively and co-creatively and collectively, that group of people can drill into what is needed. And I don't have to bring all of the ingredients to make it happen or to create it or stand it up or sell it in order for others, me plus others, to make it manifest, bring it into existence. Nowhere in any of that is leadership mandated or required unless you choose to invite it to the party. And my position is that societally, in the current paradigm, everybody automatically is programmed, imprinted to invoke the need for leadership. And I believe that's a self-fulfilling prophecy, that if I believe I need to lead, I am going to incapacitate a whole bunch of people I draw to me so that I'm the one who has to tell them what to do and when to do and how high to jump. And certainly Steve Jobs was that. He was brilliant, he was creative, he had a vision, but he also was an uber leader monster in the way he brought his vision to manifest. And was that required? Him being a dick?
No,
No,
people giggle in the room.
no,
Of
no.
course not. It wasn't required.
But if he wanted to do it that way, he had a whole company of people he would be unbelievably demanding of. He would abuse, he would whip, he would cajole, he would criticize, he would attack. He was brutal to people.
He would rule.
And because of the strength of their sharing of the passion in his vision, they tolerated it, they accepted it, they bought in. But the truth of the matter is, could Apple have happened and what he created have happened without that toxicity? Absolutely.
Of course it should, yeah.
Absolutely. So what if we can evolve and evolve past and above and beyond leadership? Like, take that out of the mix
But Doug,
and
come
figure
on.
out how to do this together.
But Doug, come on. Let's be clear here, right? People mean different things with this word. So just because you don't like that word, you say, oh, we don't need it because we associate it with power over, etc. There are many people who understand by the word leadership something more similar to what I described earlier, which is not just to start an idea, to have an idea, but to really feel responsible for bringing that idea into the world and then asking others for help, like Barry described, but still they would have to feel a personal responsibility, almost like this is my baby, and I have taken a responsibility to start this project, and that is the kind of leadership. And many people mean that when they say that word leadership, and they've already agreed with what you say. It's not about power over. They haven't, well, they've sort of decided that they don't want to be part of that paradigm, right? But maybe some of it still lingers. I know, I'll grant that, but right, you get what I'm saying? That there's an evolved notion of leadership. And some people are feel that this is very important, because otherwise we'll just be going around in circles. Does that make sense? Because I feel that's something different from the kind of leadership that you described that has its roots in the past and that power over, control over.
I see. And then I'll respond.
Thank you. So I agree, Doug, with everything that you said about leadership and power. And Glenn, I also hear what you're saying. And what I think going into a new paradigm, I do believe there is a need for energy directors, because as you know, Alex held up his prism before, and if you're working on your own side, you can't see the view from above. And that is important to see. So energy director, it's taking away the power, but the function is still there. And I think that that energy director should be someone that the other people agree is a good director, not just to get that title because they're the ones with the money funding the project. So, you know, it takes a different skill, and that skill needs to be, you know, discussed, and the goal of that role needs to be clear. And I'm complete.
And it's a value contribution that is not leadership. It's a service role to others on a different orientation and level of a large collaborative, collective creative machine. And Glenn, you can't have shades of pregnancy. You're pregnant or you're not. And either you have a leadership energy and reality existing or not. And what I'm suggesting is there is life in collective, collaborative co-creation without leadership. And the problem with it being present, even in the most enlightened servant leader guy, is that it sets up all of the other people in the organization to be led. People literally.
Why? That's the old paradigm. But that's the old paradigm, Doug. We're talking about something else.
Because people are programmed.
Yeah, but that's the past.
No, it isn't the past. If you give them the faintest leadership afflicted person at the head of the room, they literally instantaneously reconfigure spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, intellectually. They reconfigure into a passive supplicant place. Tell me what to do, where to do it, how high to jump. And it is societal.
No.
It is everywhere.
Doug, you're wrong.
Okay.
You're wrong. It doesn't necessarily happen that way.
Let me ask a challenging statement. Is this true?
Yes. Is this true? Is it true that it inevitably has to be like that when the word leadership is used? I say, no, this is not true. There are scenarios where the word leadership is used in a different meaning, and you're ignoring that, Doug. There's people mean different things with the word leadership. Why are you ignoring that?
So yeah, you've said that. So I can check something clarifying, hopefully distinguishing here. Are we conflating leader with the feeling of a ruler? Somebody who's going to rule over us? Because I would hope a leader, if like Stacy's saying, an energy director, would be feeding back information that I can't see from within my silo because they see outside. But are they also going to say, and therefore we've cut your budget? And like, oh, wait, now that's not, but what, I don't like that idea. So the power over is still there. And that's what I'm questioning. Where does it's just passing. So we need good definitions, but I do in spirit think that in what Glenn is saying, don't conflate what a good leader is with what a bad leader is, which is a tyrannical ruler.
Why can't it just be power with? Why can't it just be power
because they
with?
they pay your salary. That's usually why.
Usually.
Yeah, but that's an issue in the old system.
Alex, you raised your finger.
Yeah, I did. There's a line in the traditions somewhere in AA, and it says, we are not saints. The point is we are willing to grow along spiritual lines. It's something to do with leadership. And it says we are not leaders, we do not govern. The people who run the meetings, the secretary, the treasurer, they are trusted servants. They're not leaders, they do not govern. And the leadership comes from the group conscience in the meetings. That's why they keep minutes, and that's why they record the meetings. Over.
Sam has his hand up.
Sam?
So this is probably my check-in and my checkout, okay? And Doug, I'm gonna apologize in advance because I've heard you say a lot today and also a lot in the past. And I'm actually doing a little bit of projection when I interpret what it is that I hear from you. I hear that you have a lot of negative implications, a lot of negative associations around terms like leadership, attachment, agreement, etc., which perhaps comes out of a lot of your experience in the professional and past world that carry a lot of those negative implications. They carry a lot of, punitive aspects, restrictive aspects, freedom restricting aspects, ego-based aspects. I'm wondering whether or not you're willing to have a conversation with me about the positive aspects of those. I'll just give you one example, okay? If we were to take the notion of attachment and really say, okay, that's dangerous. Let me actually adopt this, pseudo neo age, notion of detachment as a good thing. I would point at all the citizens in Germany who were detached while the Jews were being taken off in trains. You're saying, I'm going to be detached about this. So there's a dangerous extreme to carry these things. I'm not saying that's what you're doing. I'm just saying it is possible to take these interpretations to the extreme. I think that without acknowledging the positive aspects of each of these things, leadership, ego, attachment, agreement, etc., then you're ignoring or potentially ignoring a lot of value that has come out of the last few millennia about how we do things. Not everything is of zero value, which brings me back to an associated idea of this other idea, which I really have said for 4 years, I really don't understand, which is leave everything at the door, okay? I don't know how to leave everything at the door. If you take a look at existence as waves and particles in some, non-understandable way, but if you look at the frequency behavior, and if you understand things like Fourier transforms, what meditation does is it allows these transforms, these frequencies, to actually dampen and settle. And that gives you a receptivity to new things, okay? But these wave functions don't just end. They don't just end at the door. They don't just end at time t0. They don't just end on Wednesday or Friday, They are always oscillating. So I think this notion of leaving the past at the door, to me, I don't understand it. And even if I were to understand it in my shallow imagination, I might understand, it doesn't seem valuable. A lot of what you say comes out of your experience, which is in the past. A lot of what is written in books comes out of people's studies, which is in the past. I really don't understand this present, past, future division of time. It makes no sense to me, none whatsoever. When you say, not being in the present is a projection of some future time that's not existing and whatever, so what? We're all trying to create something new, some new present. You could call it the new present. I could call it the new future. We're all just trying to create that. And we're all doing it at different paces. And some of us are learning from the past in order to do that. So there's a lot that even after 4 years, I have to confess, I really do not understand. And I just wanted to just make this one statement as an invitation to explore some of these things, because I've heard you say this a lot of times and I still don't understand them. Okay, over.
Stacy?
Well, I'll just read what I wrote. Well, maybe not, because it's gone now. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that what Doug means when he says leave things at the door, and what you talk about in terms of meditation, helping to keep things settled, I think that's the same thing. I think leaving things at the door or coming in with everything already settled is the same thing. But Doug, you have to tell me if I'm putting words into your mouth, because I don't want to do that.
Well, for me, the Sam, in what you shared, the moving parts I could unpack, and there are a bunch of different pieces to all of that. The way of relating that I'm speaking to, and it's really about a way, is something I'd be happy to dig into with you. I'd love to sort of get to a place where it puts me on the stretch to communicate it in a way that would enable you to understand it. And you represent, 2 billion engineers out there that I'm looking to get to.
No, I don't.
No, you do. The bottom line is there are these different sensibilities and orientations, and the frame you just articulated is one of them. And it's about, for me, in terms of what I'm looking to bring to the world and how I'm looking to contribute, it's about bridging and expanding people's sort of orientation and way of relating to what they're relating to. I actually don't carry a lot of the judgments that you're feeling or projecting into my shares in relation to technology, in relation to the past, in relation to knowledge, in relation to all of that stuff. I don't have any antagonisms to any of that. In terms of leadership, the languaging of it is foundational to the current societal paradigm of the Western world. And it goes back to ancient times to the present day. And it is the single biggest, most prominent projected and imposed piece of the puzzle that has turned the power, control, authority in the hands of the few over the hordes, and the hordes being compliant and living with it. It is the word for that. And the fact that, to my mind, the world has, been imprinted and programmed and acclimatized through fact and education and imprinting and all of the rest, where the majority, vast majority, serve or are powerless, rendered powerless, or believe they're powerless. The patriarchy and all of its effects on women globally, all of that is rooted in power, control, authority over. And that is something that I just see, feel, and sense in my looking at the world and how it works. I don't have a judgment over the fact that leadership has had its sway for so long and been the controlling meme and theme and approach to maintaining that power, control, authority of the few over the many and of the men over women and of this and of that and of the rest. I just note it and recognize in framing a new paradigm in a different way of relating to the ingredients of reality, that I don't invite that to the party of the new. And I don't find myself needing it in order to collaborate with a group of people or multiple groups of people in multiple places around the planet. Sort of no leader required. So that's sort of in that, where that's at. None of it is from past experiential frame. All of it is from in the present, here and now, with all the various projects and collaborations that I'm involved with. What serves everybody as co-creators together, and what gives rise to disruption of energy flow, disruption of alignment, and negative impact on realizing generative potential. So I'm very transactionally oriented around that as a dynamic, as a living dynamic. But I'd be happy to do that. You and I could do our own Bohemian thing. And we could even do it fishbowl and invite a whole bunch of people and, get to a place where everybody gets to sort of chime in, contribute, weigh in, respond. I'd love to do that.
But Doug, what's unclear to me is, where does repurposing those tools fit into your view?
Repurposing which tools?
the tools of the old industrial, all of it repurposed into a new frame?
It's less a repurposing than it is relating to it as relating to tools as tools, which is the tool is only meaningful in the context of present need.
Mhm.
And when I need it in the present current moment generative collaborative context, and if I don't have one, or
But if you meet somebody else that has one, for example.
yeah, no, I mean, my point is that in that collaborative soup, if somebody at the table has one, and out of present need, this is sort of what we need to handle or do whatever, then in living context, that person can go, oh, I got one for that. and the tool is applied. It's put to work. But it's not an exercise in abstraction. You know what I mean? It's not.
It all makes sense, but it still feels like you're 10 years ahead in a sense. There's a transitional period in between.
I may be a generation ahead and never see any of this in my lifetime. That's distinctly possible. But it doesn't mean I can't hold the vision of what, pure collective, collaborative, generative endeavor looks like, could look like, could be.
Yeah, I think I understand better what you mean now. Yeah, you're really interested in that vision.
Damn.
Okay, 2 points. I thought I was going to check out, but no. I'll say these 2 points and then I'll actually depart so that I don't actually keep responding. Okay. One, this whole notion of whether it's an immediate need or a future need, I think is also a dangerous notion. If you understand exponential behavior of, let's say, growth of plankton in lakes, for example, right? And if it doubles every day, you don't get to 50% the lake being, overtaken by plankton or algae until one day before it's just completely, too late. So if you don't understand phenomena that project in ways that are just complex, but also exponential, and if you don't predict or see those patterns existing early, take, the observations around energy and food and transportation and population, in the 50s and 60s. People saw it then. And if we were to take this position, oh, it's not an immediate present need, so we don't worry about it, okay? If you label those people as, hey, it's not a real problem, that's what got us to this situation today. We didn't listen to people who actually saw, based on the deeper understanding of science, of statistics, of energy flow, resource flow, etc. Now, I'm not saying that's the example you pose, but I'm saying that's an example that could be applied based on what I hear you say. Okay.
So
this whole notion.
No, it's actually perfect. So here's the thing, right? We had all of that, and it didn't stop us from doing nothing. You're right. Back in the 60s, right? You had Ehrlich on population. You had all the people on the environment, on global warming, on this. We had all of the data. We had all of the information. Why wasn't that? No, but hold on. Why wasn't that enough? And my orientation is to that nexus. What's needed now, and 50% of it may be all that data and projected stuff and whatever, but the other 50% is figuring out how to reconnect, reawaken discernment, reawaken curiosity, reawaken innate logic intelligence that says, injecting, micro whatever with vaccines is like, this doesn't make sense, right? Like the human half of this is not even part of the industrial equation. And the human half is what determines whether all that data and all that insight saves us or is ignored, and we just march to the extinction.
So on that point, I actually
I'm
do
just looking
believe
to balance things out and heal the other half, which has been sorely neglected. Like, you got to bring people on board and, awaken them and invite them
so. Doug, I
to
agree
be
with you on
part.
that point, but the language you used earlier didn't imply that so much, and it was dangerous. Okay, that's what I wanted to point out. There's a second point I wanted to make. That was the first point. Okay, the second point is I and a bunch of others in the Bay Area, where I was living for most of the time, we're in this organization called the Engineering Leadership something or other. It changed from center to community to special interest group. It had a lot of different names throughout the last couple decades, okay? But it basically was trying to promote these new notions of leadership, which were not authoritative, hierarchical, power over, etc., which was, in a sense, it's captured in this one phrase, leadership from any seat, okay? So there's a lot of notions and a lot of thinking, especially in the tech industry, around new notions of leadership. And that's why I think perhaps you are living in a past, and I'm being a little bit pokey here, when you say we're still, suffering from all these old notions of leadership. No, the Bay Area, the technical community have already been very aware and have been evolving it for at least 2 decades now, a new notion of leadership. I'm not saying that's gone to every CEO, but most agile teams, most engineers, most independent people understand this.
Mm.
So I do think that it's dangerous to say, oh, this word leadership is dangerous. I think you're not possibly aware of other nexus of redefinition, of regeneration, of collaboration that are redefining and taking a new perspective on leadership. Because in the end, okay, I do like this notion. It's a very beautiful notion that emergence actually co-creates. But in my experience, it actually doesn't, okay? What happens is individuals seed discussion with individual little insights, like you did there, like Barry does sometimes, like, Kayla's gonna do next week, like, Glenn does when he writes, and like Stacy did Friday, but and individual little seed thoughts can then bounce off of other people. That's the co-creation, okay? If we have systems that prevent the bounce, that absorb and don't reflect, that just ignore or direct to dev null, okay? That's when co-creation doesn't happen. But it doesn't just emerge between two people out of thin air, okay? One person has to give a seed expression of it first. The other person then say, well, let's tweak it this way. Then the tweaking happens, okay? That's co-creation, that's emergence to me, because I haven't seen anything appear out of quote unquote this liminal space. It doesn't. It still comes from individual people, individual expressions. And that, I think, is still a valid form of leadership. It's a first mover notion of leadership.
I see it as creating from being, but I don't
I don't know what that
see
means.
I don't see
Really don't know what that
leadership
means.
being involved.
I really don't know.
But Doug, what about if you talk to
Okay,
somebody
anyway,
like
I'm
you're
done with
doing
my
now?
2 points. I'm going to sign out and not speak anymore today, okay?
Thank you. I thought that was awesome what you said there, Sam. So yeah, for example, like what about if you speak to someone who just happens to use the word leadership about that, which you call creation from being? What you do then? Because I'm just what I'm seeing, Doug, is that if you then say, oh, we don't need any leadership at all, and start with that whole thing, it can come across as kind of dismissive and arrogant and condescending almost. So it's, there is a risk that it could come across a little bit like that, kind of dismissing, instead of sort of just acknowledging people actually mean very different things with this word. And there is an emergent new understanding, as Sam just said.
My experience of people either as leaders in the leadership equation or as people in the led bucket of the leadership meme are just as programmed and sort of entrenched in those roles and those orientations to how they do or create or lead or manage or whatever as you know, a Trump follower. It doesn't carry the political charge, but it's just as dogmatically entrenched and core belief.
Yeah, I understand that,
And-
but where do you
and-
place
and
that
so
kind of
my-
leadership that Sam
so-
just mentioned? Where's
So,
that fit
well,
in?
well,
Because you said this many times.
consciousness, expanded sort of consciousness embodied in a leader,
Many leaders.
well, embodied in many leaders. Can they conceive of stepping out of a leadership role? Are they
Leadership in-
prepared to let go of the title?
It's not even the title.
Well,
It's
it
no
is the ti-
title.
No, hold on. It is the title, because we're not talking, you know, if somebody's a leader, if somebody has a C-suite title, if somebody has a manager title, they're buying into and part of a hierarchical leadership
But
structure.
again, you're speaking about the old forms of leadership, Doug. This isn't
I'm
the
not
kind of
saying-
leadership that Sam just described. It exists.
I'm not meeting engineers in global multinational industrial and other companies that are telling me about this Silicon Valley version. I'm meeting people that are fucking dying on the vine.
So
And
basically, you're saying.
both in the leader position and in the lead position.
So are you then saying that you actually just simply haven't experienced any of what Sam just talked about? Is that the point?
I've read about and studied a lot of companies, especially in next stage org and in Teal and in those domains, and organizations that have adopted new structures like holacracy, right? All of them, very few of them actually reflect in reality a transcendence of leadership and lead, concentrations of authority, power, and control. Very, very few of them, even at the leading edge. And moving back from that to other companies, and it seems to be endemic to the phenomenon of scaling. When the startup becomes 100 people or more, these leadership hierarchical projections of power, control, authority over come in. They're resorted to.
So if I hear you right, then the disagreement between you and Sam is simply that you seem to say that the kind of leadership that he speaks about is very, very rare.
Yeah, I haven't crossed paths with a situation where it's manifest.
Right. And that's interesting. But what about a situation which
I
has
just haven't seen
promise? What about something that is incomplete but has promise of going in that direction? Because I think that's
Oh, I think it's possible
part
to
of
do
it.
it differently, but then the leadership meme isn't required. It's a different kind of
but it's a
evolutionary
different
process.
but it's a different leadership meme. That's the point.
Can I interrupt here and say that Alex has had his hand for a while and I'd like to contribute as well. So thank you.
Alex?
Some dilemma about leadership is probably due to the breakdown of the global community into vested interest groups, nation states, and what have you. And some of them are run by corporations until they run into the ground. So that's the greed and the leadership designed to reap as great a profit as possible without paying tax. But this idea I've got of leadership is for a father-like figure in each community, because it's a part of the family. It's a global family. I mean, in the family situations, everyone's accounted for because some of them, unless they're corrupted. So that's why the guidelines exist. The guidelines are built for a global family situation where we have people who care about each other as you'd care for your own kin. We're all in the same boat when it comes to humanity's chance of surviving what's coming. And because we're all in the same boat, we have this family of man or should I say, to be non-sexist, a family of humanity, family of men and women, which is global, all 7.6 billion of us. And the guidelines that go the same as in any family. I'm reminded of a film, a Godfather movie, or I think it was an old Boston movie of the gangsters in the gangster days. And one of them said Luigi was a good boss, but he wasn't a leader. It was one of those Italian jokes. But anyway, that's me over. Kylie.
So it's kind of nice to see a block. I would have to like to say my version of leadership, being a leader myself in the community, giving opportunities for people to learn about the culture and more specifically about the cultural dance. Um, you know, if I were to say, hey, you guys are just going to do Tahitian dance, you just do it. You know, I think people would get kind of confused in that sense. So I feel like they need leadership. They need somebody to show them. Um, and it's not really a bad thing. I hear what you're saying about bad leaders. I personally, aside from all of the political leaders and most of them that are corrupt, um, you know, it's kind of amazing to see energetically what their intentions are. But for my personal interest, I don't think leadership is a bad thing, you know. And so, anyways, kind of going back to a situation that happened this past week when I was in Ohio. I was invited to talk about the Polynesian culture, and I wanted to make sure it was correct. I wanted to make sure I was leading people to, you know, some sources of education that are as correct as possible, and not quite to romanticize about it, but just more so just to be educated about everything. And then I went to a luau. Thank goodness I wasn't dancing, even though I had offered to, where I saw a woman that they had hired dancing, and it was kind of borderline offensive. You know, it would be perceived as borderline offensive to, you know, the culture that I was representing. So, you know, I don't know if it would be power over, but I did say that, you know, I'd be more than happy to teach you guys a more traditional way of doing things. So in that sense, I feel like what Stacy said about the energetic type of leader, and honestly, I would be more than happy to step out of that leadership role. You know, I feel like I'm too old to be able to dance. I'd like to find some 20-year-old, you know, person. But like what Glenn said, it's not necessarily a bad thing when you're labeling leadership in that respect. And it's a little bit more dumbing down to the um, global areas that everybody else is talking about. But just drawing on from my experience, I don't think that word leadership is a bad word.
Gary?
Yeah, I would also like to say something good about leadership. The reason that I'm here and alive today is because of leadership in my grandparents' time. If my grandparents hadn't had the vision, like a Paul Ehrlich vision, to get the hell out of Eastern Europe, to get the hell out of the Pale of Settlement in the 1890s, I wouldn't be here. And the relatives of my ancestors who stayed didn't have any offspring. So there was, you know, leadership to get the hell out of a bad situation that they could foresee decades before the Holocaust. And so I was born in Kansas, which is to say I was born.
I get that. I get that. So here's part of what's coming up for me. I'm a big believer in ancient traditions, ancient wisdom. So in indigenous contexts, there were tribal councils, and maybe some of them would have a chief, in quotes, but it was primarily about wisdom, about knowledge, like the greatest holders of knowledge, and their guidance and service to the safety and the thriving of. And in the context of the arts and dance, you have teachers and masters. And I think there's, in those contexts, those words sit better for me. Being an authority in relation to you and how you are oriented to your cultural tradition and your art is a word that projects more effectively what you represent, what you bring, what you have to contribute. In that sense, being an authority on, being a master of, fits better. I wouldn't normally attach the leadership meme to those roles. And intrinsic in the difference between those two names for those roles and leadership as a meme, teaching with authority doesn't involve a projection of power control over. It involves teaching. It involves knowledge transfer. It involves giving somebody information, guidance, whatever, in how to do something or how to practice something. And I don't see that as you making somebody do it right. So it might seem picky, and it might seem like an English major going rogue, but I can't think of a context where there isn't a better suited name or title that also doesn't carry the load, the emotional intrinsic load that's embedded in the leader meme. And from your inside out wearing a hat, your being an authority is something you're never too old to be. Your being a master is also something that never too old to be, but you being a practitioner of that which you are a master of may be something that fades with age when you start talking about dance or, I work with some people that are masters in Qigong and dance. And, they're both on in their 70s and, but they still teach. They're still authoritative in terms of the dance, the schools of dance that they teach. But that power piece, not so much.
Kayla asked in the chat if teachers should be leaders, and Barry put in the chat that educators are leaders. And I had been thinking, now I forgot his name, Howard.
Reingold?
No, the man who said what the world needs is for people to come alive. Thurman? Howard Thurman? Howard.
Not sure. I agree with the sentiment though.
And so what I want to say though is, there's a point at which every yes answer flips to a no, depending on where we are. And what I mean by that is, I do believe that leaders are necessary to help those that haven't figured out how to come alive. But at that point, that's when the leadership in the more authoritative way is no longer necessary. But as you pointed out, people that have that powerful leadership thing going are not that likely to want to let it go. There are many who do. There are many who truly want to empower others to do that. But there are also many more that for whatever reason, don't want to give that up. And so what I'd like to see is more of an emphasis on helping those that are working on coming alive to have a more level playing field. And if I could just give a quick example. So on Tuesday, I wanted to have this call. And that was my way of, you know, not being a leader in the powerful sense, but a leader of, come on, let's try this, an energy kind of thing. And the issue that I had is that I didn't have my own account. So I needed to depend on somebody else to open up that room. And for whatever reason, it didn't happen. And I think that's the kind of level playing field that I'd like to see. I mean, yes, I could take it upon myself to go and purchase an account. But again, that's putting a burden on. There's something to be said for taking responsibility, and I fully understand that. But when I'm talking about a whole society with a lot of people who have not found their way into coming alive, if we can look at that and realize that anything we do to help those people come alive will affect all of us, I think that would be a really positive way to focus our attention. And I hope I was clear. I don't know if I said everything I wanted.
Yeah, that made sense perfectly to me.
What is his name? Okay.
Well, folks, we're floating well past our designated hours, but I want to invite closing Cher's thoughts.
Well, I can close.
Go
Oh,
first.
sorry.
Yeah. Go ahead, Kayla.
It's good to see everybody.
Good to see you.
Thanks. I just had wanted to, because I put in the chat, educators can also be corrupt. You know,
Yes.
leaders, these educators can also be corrupt. And I wanted to share that, you know, before I did my presentation, I had to reference a lot of articles and things, and also some recordings of some of the ancient society. And there were two instances that I found both in Tahiti and in Hawaii where their monarchy, their ari'i, their ali'i, had, you know, as keepers and beholders of the tradition and also rulers of the people, had utilized outside help to suppress that. I just kind of wanted to throw it out there because we're talking about energy and we're talking about, you know, coming alive. At one point, does a leader, an educator, somebody as an authoritative figure become dead inside to where they just want to kill a lot of the good things in society? And I feel like that's what the block was all about here, having listened to it from the beginning. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
I'll check out. I only put half the comment in the chat, so it's out of context. So what he actually said is, don't ask yourself what the world needs. Ask yourself what makes you come alive and go do that. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive. And I guess my point is for the people that don't know what makes them come alive. And I think there's a lot of them, and we see them on Facebook arguing every day. How can we empower them? And direct their energy.
Yeah, I'll say a few last words on that too. And that's kind of what I'm hearing from Doug is it's that if we're in the energy primarily in the present and from a state of service, from a state of acceptance of wanting to contribute, if that's the focus, then we can be free from the past and free from the vocabulary of the past. We may not need to, as you say, evoke the leadership meme we may not need to use any of the old language. Yet then, of course, when Doug talks about that, then that can create a reaction for among those people who associate with that language something very different and who are interested in the evolution of some of these concepts, and who, and you know, the reality being that many of these old concepts, which maybe we don't need to use, they are in use by many people. And if we're going to communicate with them, then we may need to acknowledge them, and in that sense. So what's the solution here? I'm wondering, could it then be that what we need is to find a kind of inner freedom from these memes and these words? I don't have to use them myself, and I would encourage myself and others to try to invent new and better language. Yeah, that's a very good, interesting project. And then could that happen while at the same time being able to gently play with these memes in conversation with people, and do so without coming across as arrogant and condescending, which, you know, can very easily happen when you sort of come from this place. Well, we don't need all that. So that's a communication challenge. But you know, that essential point I'm hearing, I think it's very sound, that an inner freedom from all of these concepts, an inner freedom from concepts at all. It was actually the thing I talked about at the beginning. It feels very essential to this. And there is, maybe that is the freedom that enables us to have that ability to still use those concepts instead of being abused by them, because it's now a different frame, and we don't need them, but we can kind of play with them. Yeah, that's what came to me. So rich session today. Thank you, everyone.
I'll say this, I want to be free from the mistakes of the past, but I don't want to detach from the wisdom and the insights from the past.
I'll close with this statement about the well of wisdom, the deep well of wisdom that comes from living in the present moment and listening to your inner higher power, your best guess of what is right, your best guess of what is the thing to promote in opposition to the thing that's causing harm. Over.
I'll check out. I find it interesting that some of our blocks come back to confront us if we don't unblock them. So I think in the group, one of the blocks is that I try to integrate into my framework, what I bring. Even if I try to be completely open, I'm still going to have a certain contaminated being of my existence and learnings up till now. And I try to lead with ideas that aren't necessarily my own, but ones that mentors. We have mentors, and our, be it our parents, our teachers. We don't need to use the word leader in this sentence when I'm talking about values of who I am. But there certain, I think when you stand back, there is a characteristic of people that you can say helped guide you. And if they made decisions over top of you, then it's more like a parental role. Then, there could be all kinds of conflicts where my parents had power over me. So this conversation can go many ways, but within the context of the group, the blocks I see coming back are the one about, am I making agreements? Do I understand what agreements are? In what frame am I proposing a thing or a work that I would agree to? So, and these are the kinds of things I'm trying to map out. I'm not trying to map a two-dimensional map of how to get from here to there as far as geography, but I'm trying to bring together ideas as close as I can from different people, and they agree with that idea and coexist beside other ideas. And I saw Glenn trying to bring his idea to coexist beside Doug's, and I saw Sam saying, whoa, let's look at the boundaries again. So what I'm doing is trying to bring in service to highlight that, not say I have the right version, but when I'm asking you questions, does that mean the puzzle piece goes here, doesn't go there, or it's not a puzzle piece at all? And if you say it's not a puzzle piece, there has to be somewhere where I hang that thing when other people come to say, hey, no, that's not a puzzle piece. Doug says it's not. And somebody pick it up and say, well, he hasn't tried this with it yet. And I would hope Doug would be excited to come over and see what this great new idea is. But there's going to be some context where it's a no-go. And I guess that's where I try to make my filters. And Stacy was talking about some filters she could make. So we're talking about filters. Like, what are we filtering? And are we having a conversation about what we're filtering? And is the conversation about what we're filtering a fair one? So that's a lot of layers of thinking and talking. But how you can map out the context you're in comes from embellishing it with symbology of some sort. And I think Kayla says the symbology she got from watching her traditional dance be manipulated in an unfair way to give an impression of not what it was that language was meant to express. So is it a new derivative work that can be branched off, and Kayla can be comfortable to say, interesting where that came from, but that's not what we do. We do it over here. And we have the Dance Club A, and people who want to dance on Broadway, well, you can choose Dance Club B. There's nothing wrong with that. But when they conflate the two, does it interfere with your identity? And I think having our identities brushed up against is the, do I have to associate with that? I put stuff in the chat today about what I'm projecting Doug might have said or Sam might have said. Did we stop and validate that? Is that for the record now? Am I going to go down as history as the Feynman and everybody believes what I said? Doug never got a chance to criticize it yet. So yeah, I think this process of finding the boundaries of our terminology is very important. We have a terminology page, we have search tools. We can now start to go back and make valuable use of what we're trying to express, if it is what we're trying to do, and help each other look at, I guess in my case, it would be a whole lot of talk and very little meaning, if you ask Barry. So I take that as as well-meant criticism. So I'm thinking of ways that I could adapt with Barry, but that's not the same way I would adapt with maybe other people. But together, all of the feedback will end up, I'll have a better way to say, I would like people to consider what they're saying and doing, just like all the rest of you people would like. And wouldn't it be nice if we had tools to remember what the hell that was? And without attaching us to it necessarily. So that's I think the element I need to have Doug appreciate my, I do feel unappreciated, but we won't talk about my whining because I'm not begging. It's coming down to, I do feel like some of the things Doug has said, I resonate with, and how do I bring those into the picture so that they fit with, my baggage, Sam's baggage. And like Glenn says, let somebody come without having to drink the Kool-Aid. So if Doug's offering me Kool-Aid, I'm not drinking. What is that Kool-Aid? I don't think he is offering Kool-Aid, but there is some kind of filter. So the conversation is about filters. How do we filter people in? How do we filter them out? And is that filtering fair? because we're filtering for time and understanding and for better. We're filtering for better. You can't just take it all. If an artist tries to take it all, they end up with mixing mud, right? The painter. Anyway, and that analogy is no good either without a context like a painter. So it doesn't apply to an astronaut, for example. I'm sure they need to study everything. Don't forget anything. Anyway, thank you.
So I thoroughly enjoyed today and thoroughly appreciate all of you for coming and bringing you. And my experience is of us very slowly and incrementally becoming more spacious with each other. And at least in all the places that I'm working and traveling these days, that's sort of the ticket. All about expanding this space to accommodate is ultimately reality includes everything that everybody said and contributed. That's a fact, not an opinion. And we can figure out how to be gracious about welcoming all of that as a as each individual as a contribution to a whole, and come from appreciation and relation to it. And we're on the right track. So for me, that's happening. So thank you. And I turn you back to your Sundays, Alex, your Monday. And may it be joy-filled, pain-free, and generative.
Thank you. Have a good day, guys.